So coming back to my introduction, right now I'm at the Berlin Institute of Health. That's a rather new institute for translation medicine. And there's a huge compartment for digital medicine. And so we call it like a digital science or health data science. Where I'm located in, and I'm the director of the facility Digital Medicine and Interoperability, which are more or less the last 3.5 years. And Berlin and the Charité then decided to give me the professorship on October 1st. So why am I doing this strange topic? Because I'm convinced that good medicine can only be in the future if we work digital, and digitalization depends on interoperability. So let's come to my short agenda. First of all, I want to give you some use cases where we need interoperability, and then talk about FAIR data and what we are doing with FAIR data standards, which standards are important for us, and terminologies for, this is my main topic, like ontologies and technologies, and some projects. And last but not least, I will talk about EUCOM. EUCOM is very interesting for the PTB. So what's interoperability? I think I don't have to explain it to you, but it's not only important that systems exchange information, but they have to be able to use this information in a meaningful way. So we have different levels of interoperability. There's a pure technical level. We have the syntax level, so should we use XML or JSON or both? Semantics, like terminologies, and I think the most important level is the organizational level, because we have to we have to share data, and if we are not willing to share data, we should not talk, or not talk about the other levels. First of all, we have to have like an agreement, and then we find all these levels. So what is the motivation? We want to have a reproducibility in research of data, reusability, and we want to harmonize data sets. For instance, now the COVID-19 data sets, there's a huge project going on in Germany and in the EU or worldwide, where we collect data, and because there's no standard behind the data, we have to harmonize data sets and data items. So, and we want to make it reusable and machine readable. So this is my I think a very important abstract about why digital medicine depends on interoperability here in digital medicine. From nature. First of all, we want to communicate to avoid errors, medical errors. It's about patient safety. And then we want to make research upon this data to improve the use of real world data or create new hypotheses. And with this research, we want to make international research and have international cooperations. And especially here, the field of rare diseases is in my focus, because we have to use data from all over the world to do data modeling, for instance, on this data, and have data sets on rare diseases. We are working on this as well. And then if we have good data, we can do algorithms and models and so on upon this data. So this is very important to know, that data should be harmonized or should be standardized in the source system, and not in like big data algorithms. because we can avoid errors then. So as a first example, I will show you current communication interface between devices and the hospital information system. And here you can see the now used HR7 version 2 protocol, which allows systems to exchange data with each other and with the electronic health record or the hospital information system. But unfortunately, this is not used everywhere, is not supported by communication servers or the devices. So in addition, the protocols offer so many freedom that dialects occur in every implementation, and the semantic content which we should use, like a terminology, is not included in this protocol, as you can see here. So there's a new standard, the IEEE 11073 device service-oriented device connectivity standard, SDC, that defines communication protocols for point-of-care medical devices. So we have a transport standard called Medical Device Communication Profile for Web Services, and the Domain Information Service Model and Architecture and Binding Definition. So this is not implemented yet, but just in some systems from Draeger and Philips, they work with this new protocol. So, and therefore we are trying to find and specify these standards, and especially the ISO standards from TC 215, this is medical informatics, describe how systems communicate with each other. And within these standards, we refer to existing standards from HL7. HL7 is an organization which provides standards. And there's a new standard which is called FIRE, and I will talk a lot about FIRE in the next minutes. So, and then on top of this FIRE JSON standard, we have LOINC, SNOMED, or IDMP. IDMP is for drugs, SNOMED, and LOINC is are huge terminologies for the medical field. So, beside that, we have standards which are in use in radiology. I think everybody has heard about DICOM. And now we are using DICOM not only within the radiology field, but here within dermatology. So DICOM can improve AI workflows by encoding derived objects and the efficient curation of multi-institutional data sets for machine learning trainings, testings, and validations, as you can see here. So the next domain is research, and here you can see two organizations which work together since like 1 year, and the ODC community is the Observational Health Data Science and Informatics community, which has built a common data model for sharing information in most in pharmaceutical studies. And HL7 is another organization which provides standards for healthcare. So they try to work together right now, or it's from March 21, this year. And so they try to map the FIRE standard, which is used within EHRs, to the ODC OMOP data model, which is used for research for pharmaceutical studies. So, and everything what we are doing is under the roof of the WHO and the Joint Initiative Council, which works together like as an organization, and they try to build an umbrella for all these standardization organizations, which are really important and which are in the field here of healthcare. like CDISC for clinical trials, SEN and ISO. I think you know everything about SEN and ISO. DICOM for imaging, or GS1 just for common IDs, so identifiers in the healthcare field or in all fields. HL7 and IHE, and the main reason I decided not to be a radiologist was IHE, because I saw in Aachen how system vendors work together with an IHE. And they and I thought, when I was like 20 years ago, a young scientist, that this is the future of healthcare. LOINC is about observations and lab results, and SNOMED is a very, very huge terminology. And so there's another collaboration with the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, who are within the field of bioinformatics. So they try to work together. They try, more or less. So, and there we have 300 different standards within the TC215. I work within the semantic content work group, and the pharmacy and medicine business, and the system and device interoperability work group. And there we try to mirror these standards to the European SEN and to our DIN. So we are not building new standards within SEN and DIN. We are just trying to work together at an international level, because healthcare is international. Yeah, and here are some standards which are very important and strategic products of the JIC. For instance, that SDC that I already showed to you, or the International Patient Summary. I'm one author of this International Patient Summary, where we try to find out which data elements we should use for the EHR. Like a core data set for a worldwide EHR, and this EHR is now the most important standard within our field. And the Gematik, who is in Germany responsible for the infrastructure and for the EHR, is now using the HL7 standard FIRE, and the standard, the ISO standard IPS, International Patient Summary, for their German EHR. Other countries are working with this as well, like Austria. They have a very good EHR since many years, called ELGA, and this is based upon this International Patient Summary as well. So we can exchange in the future cross-border information if we want to. So fast healthcare interoperability resources are the most important standard, or is the most important standard family worldwide right now. It's more or less XML, or healthcare specific XML or JSON, and plus a REST API for accessing them. And we use modern web technologies like HTTP, REST, OAuth, and so on. And the new infrastructure here in Germany, the EPA 2.0, will be based on these new standards. And so we don't need any connectors anymore and plastic cards. So, and I'm very happy about this. So what is this specification about? It's more or less a library of data items. It's like a Lego, you can just take those items that you need. For instance, if you want to build a vaccination certificate, you can just take something out of medication and of the patient information, and then we have our vaccination certificate. So they used more or less parts of this in our vaccination certificate as well, but then they decided to make a proprietary fire proprietary JSON for our certificate, but we can map it to fire very easily. So beside that, there's a standard family for the identification of medicinal products, which is used at BfArM and European Medicine Agency and FDA and other agencies to have a, or to build a standard database. Because all these drugs have different names. If you go from here to Spain, you have different names of drugs. And so this is about patient safety as well, and about pharmacovigilance. So we need standards. And standards which are used within all fields, clinical domain, research, or public health. Because if you have a positive PCR test for COVID-19, it should not be different within the research field or within public health. And therefore, we try to convince our governments, that be the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Science, Economics, to force these standards for the pandemic. And yeah, we did it. And so Mr. Wheeler has now good data within the Robert Koch Institute. So this is how it looks like. This is like a syntactic protocol with an ontology within, and you can see here the ontology, which is really complex because medicine is complex, and sure, our SARS-CoV-19 is complex as well. So you see so many different IDs and different components here, or concepts for just for the SARS coronavirus. And within this ontologies, which is called LOINC, we have more than 90,000 concepts just for lab results and vital data. Yeah, and right now we can only use the ICD-10 in Germany, and we just had one code, the U07.1, for a positive coronavirus test. So we need much more. Because, as you all know, the ICD-10 is just more for reimbursement purposes and a little bit of quality assurance, but it is not enough. So the ICD-10 has 2,500 codes, and SNOMED, for instance, which you see here on the right-hand side, has more than 450,000 concepts. And because medicine is complex, we need a rich language. Yeah, and here you can see a lab test result, what we provide in our hospital information systems, which are really modern because they refused, our system vendors refused to use LOINC and SNOMED. They just had their own codes here. They just said, I can translate this to you. This is an observation, this is a data type, and this is the ID of something that you want to observe, and this is the result. And if you look at this here, you can see our calcium that has a result measurement code here, millimole per liter, and so on. This is what we have in our systems, and that would be great, but they refuse to use LOINC here in Germany, and so every system vendor used their own ontology, so we weren't able to see which, for instance, test they made. That was the main problem when we had the pandemic. So let's look at fire. Fire is much more complex, and here you can see an observation. This is a UML diagram, and you can see the status, the performer information, the value, and the range, ratio, for instance, and the interpretation, whether it's normal or not, and the body side, which methods for instance, a PCR or something, a specimen, its blood or urine, the device, and so on, and then the components and the reference ranges here. And if you translate this to XML, it looks like this. I think everybody can read this quite nice. You see the glucose, which is here, which has a code, which is a unique code from the terminology LOINC. And then you see the patient name, periods, the performer name, lange Welt, and then the quantity. It's 6.3 millimole per liter. And this is out of a system that we are using. This is the units of measurement system, which is based on SI units from. And you can see this liter is a big liter. So which standards are we using? Yeah, terminology standards and syntactic standards. And this is something that you saw before. This is out of our family, but right now we are using within research, for instance, new terminologies like the orphanet, which is for rare diseases, or the HPO, the human phenotype ontology, which is built here or was built here in at Charité to find out special genetic variants. So everything should fit together, and this is a huge effort. And here's one standard, which is from the community of the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. This is about phenopackets, and you can see they want to like digitalize their information, and with phenopackets they can provide a format for integrating an individual's genomic data and phenotypic information like symptoms or diagnosis and so on. And so that you can share this data. So what do we need? We need a good terminology or ontology, and Germany's BfArM joined SNOMED International this year. So we were not able to use SNOMED before because we didn't have like a national license for this. But now everybody can use SNOMED for free. They have to just to tell the BfArM that they want to use it. And you saw some codes of SNOMED before, and yeah, this is very important. And why is it important to have a worldwide language like a lingua franca for all countries? And before that, we had this huge project, Assess CT, assessing SNOMED CT for large-scale EHS deployment in the EU. And within this project, we tried to find out whether we should use like something like SNOMED or nothing, no language at all, or we should build a European language. And sure, we had some key recommendations here, so that SNOMED CT is the best candidate for core reference terminology. SNOMED CT should be part of an overarching European EHS strategy. SNOMED should be part of an ecosystem of terminologies, but we should adopt it incrementally. And if we are trying to translate it, we should do it incrementally as well, and by use case. And right now there's a huge group. I think this is from 2015, yes. And now 6 years later, we are more or less the same group here, and we are now trying to translate this into the German language. Yeah, besides that, you saw LOINC, and LOINC is a huge terminology for free from the Ringstreif Institute in America, and the man who was the founder of LOINC is now at NLM, and that's the National Library of Medicine, and NIH, that's the National Institute of Health in the US, and he provides LOINC for free. Yeah, and here you can see what you can do with LOINC, like to have measurements, observations, documents. Beside that, we are working in this field right now. This is my group here. We try to find out or try to create terms for patient-reported outcome measures. This is something if you leave the hospital, you can get questionnaires and they ask you, for instance, how much pain you still feel. This is very important for the future of medicine, to know something about your patient after the intervention. Yeah, beside that, we have a reproducibility crisis. And this lack of interoperable data is also a major reason for this crisis. And in the last years, much attention has been given to this crisis in science. So many results of scientific studies cannot be replicated. And as a consequence, many journals like Nature or PLOS one require that authors make their data available. I just got a request this morning from Nature. They want to build like huge communities who want to work together here and provide data. But this data has to be fair. And I think you have heard about the FAIR principles. Yeah, here are the FAIR principles. So it should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, this data. And I just want to point out some things, like it should be findable. We should have a global unique identifier, which should be persistent, and it should be free and open. Interoperable, we should use vocabularies which have this identifier and can be queried and shared, and it should be reusable. So we have like a provenance, and it should meet, I think this is the most important part, meet domain relevant community standards. So we cannot use standards from biology or other standards within the medical field because we have a different language. Yeah, but fair data is not open data, that's for sure, because not all open data are fair. Just because data is available or accessible doesn't mean that it's structured according to the FAIR principles. And not all fair data is open. And fair data can have clear rules for accessibility so that only authorized persons or institutions can access the data. So I now want to show you some projects which we are working on. And I think this is one of the most important projects here in Germany because we want to build research infrastructures in all domains. And we won this project for the healthcare domain with many partners here, as you can see. And we want to provide here interoperable data and an infrastructure which combines epidemiological, public health, and clinical trials and studies all together. And so we can increase the visibility and accessibility of research data. We can enhance the reputation of scientists which are sharing the data and fostering new collaborations. And the resulting infrastructure will build bridges between user communities and data holders from all these domains. So yeah, it's about interoperability and cooperation, data harmonization, later on AI and sharing and record linkage. So what are we doing? We try to bridge data from data registries, like for instance, this clinical trial registry, but this is not harmonized with other registries and studies in Germany. And here we can see the epidemiological studies, and we want to combine these data items. So what are we doing here within this project? We are building an interoperability roadmap for research infrastructures in Germany. We're working with standards, terminologies that you already saw before. We try to use the ontologies and build so-called value sets. These are like small catalogs, like for the gender, for instance. And we are now developing implementation guides so that vendors can build their software upon our implementation guides. And this is one task force about COVID-19, and we built this database where you have the ability to browse or items, and you have the you can access the studies which were going on here in Germany. And then we tried to find out whether SNOMED-CT is suitable for this database, and we found out that we can use SNOMED-CT for the metadata of this registry. So here's another project from Erlangen, from Uli Prokosch. He made a whole registry based on these HL7 standards, and this is more or less new because our registries or our studies in Germany weren't standardized at all. So it was on paper, or if it wasn't on paper, it was on RedCap. That's a huge open source community which provides one software for clinical trials or within other software, but these vendors didn't use standards at all. So he standardized it, and it works quite nice with HL7 and Fire and SNOMED. And this was a very nice project for XNet. It was designed for neuroimaging, and it was is a standard, but they didn't use these standards and made their own standard XNet, which was quite nice. And we tried to map it to the existing Fire standards, and it worked quite nicely. Yeah, and then we were the group here in Germany which was responsible for the so-called Corona consensus data set. The Ministry of Science, I'm sorry, she told us that we should have one standard for all studies, and so we created a GECO data set with 200 items. And within the Fire standard, it was quite suitable for many studies for COVID-19 in Germany. We did the same with the European Union because this GECO data set was so nice and good that this European project said that this should be the core data set for this huge project Orchestra, which is an Horizon 2020 project. So the harmonization is based on the GECO data set. Beside that, we have the Medical Informatics Initiative, where all university hospitals work together, and we created a core data set for basic modules and extensions. And right now we are working very hard on the oncology use case and other use cases, or on the use case on rare diseases. This is the collaboration on rare diseases with another standard, which is called Orphanet. And next year, all hospital information system vendors have to use the new Orphanet standard from BfArM, and I'm very happy about this because rare diseases should be visible. Yeah, here you can see the data set, how it looks like in the standard. It's very easy. You just try. No, it's not really easy, but you try to find out what you have for requirements. Then you translate it to Fire, and then Fire makes then JSON or XML out of this specification. And here you can read this. You see the H36.0 from the ICD-10 GM, and it says something like, no, it's something different. E10 is the diabetic retinopathy. And so this is readable for other systems. And we made the same with lab results. You saw it before, Loing, you remember Loing, HL7 version 2, HL7 Fire. And this is complex because lab medicine is complex. And here you have 6 axes with the component, the property, timing, system, scale, and method. And within Loing, then the Regenstrief Institute, together with Professor Shadow, who was a German professor, Regenstrief Institute, they found out that we need something for the units of measurement. Yeah, and you see that we created upon base standards like SI, ANSI standards, the UCOM standard. Why do we need a special standard? It's the ISO standard 11240 for units of measurement in medicine, because we have very, very funny units in medicine, like the mouse unit, or for blood pressure, millimeter Hg. Yeah, that's it's not a unit. So we had, but it's used within the healthcare field, and so it was then the aim to have like a system for medicine. Yeah, A and for year, or R, or CD for candela and centiday, and so we provided the standard or international units here, and some missing concepts like this funny standard here, or this funny unit. And so the Regenstrief Institute, which is responsible for Loing, because it's an observation, you can measure observations, and the units, then units of measure, provided this standard since, I think, more than 20 years right now. But no vendors in Germany use this. And now we want to force them to use this system. You can download it here on international download site, or at BfArM, which is now responsible for standardization and digital health. Yeah. Yes, for example, here. Yeah, and within the standard Fire and version 2, they are using these UCOM codes. Yeah, the standards provides the codes as well. So the benefits are that you can communicate with a standardized fair language, and you have standardized not only lab concepts, but all concepts within healthcare. You can do analysis upon this Fire resources, for instance, and can collaborate here, improve workflows, quality, and so on. And it's more or less about patient safety. We do it all for our patients, not for us. And so translational medicine depends on interoperability and units, yeah. And we want to provide fair data for the EHR. And this EHR will be in a few years within your smartphone, and you can provide and share data with your doctor or your hospital. So the conclusion is that we should use fair principles, enhance the reusability of our not only scientific data, but all data. And so we can process this data, and this can aid the democratization of medicine, making health technologies accessible, improving healthcare, fostering innovations, and enable translational medicine. Thank you. 45 minutes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Sylvia. I think it's you mentioned a lot of very important topics, which are also in the heart of a PTB, and I really like that you stress the importance of units and the strange use of strange units, which is still also a nightmare for us. Yeah, I would like that the people could use in the lower row of their bit is a reaction panel, and they can raise their hand and then they can ask their questions. Maybe I guess there will be a number of questions just seeing the type of the people here. But maybe I can start while people are raising their hands. You mentioned these two very important standards, the HL7 and the FIRE, which are coming from the same organization. Actually, I'm not quite sure what's the main difference there. From my understanding is that this is just another level, and people are using XML for the FIRE. But can you maybe elaborate a little bit more? What's the main difference between FIRE and HL7?
Yeah, HL7 provides FIRE, and they provide version 2 and another version which is called version 3 or CDA. So these were the same people who provided this content, and they just did it with a modern technology. And the modern technology is the REST technology, web service. It is able for web services, and the old technology was just EDIFACT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So as we have seen in your presentation, a lot of people are moving now into that direction and using this FIRE as something which is coming and getting more used. But maybe Daniel Hütchenreuter, you have a question.
So thank you very much. So first, also from my side, thank you for this excellent presentation. I think many people in metrology today are wondering what are these FAIR principles and how do they look like? And I think from the domain of health and medicine, you are so far advanced to implement these principles. So it was a very great example. We are working a lot in the domain of internationally harmonizing unit representation and digital systems. So now I heard you say you want to force your community to use UCUM, and I'm sure you're absolutely aware that, or I'm absolutely aware that you didn't mean force, but try to convince them. So we are also trying to convince people to go towards common representation of units. So I think one good question could be how you are exchanging on the international level with other communities already to go towards common standards for the unit representations. Because I think everybody wants to prevent a situation where, for example, medicine bodies require one system of units, and then, for example, CIPM, BIPM come around and say, we want a complete different system of units for the digital representations.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge because we are not able to share this data internationally. We always have to harmonize it first, or try to understand what was coming in, and this is not machine readable, or we cannot use it. So this is the biggest challenge, I think, in the next years. Therefore, we need these digital health structures like the Gematik in Germany or other structures, which should force. I think we should force vendors to use this unit.
And so maybe a short follow-on question, if the time's allowed. So if you set now the unit standard, and in future some bigger international organization like ISO will say we have a different recommendation because another recommendation would work for more communities, how easy would it be to adapt it? What do you think in the medicine domain when the standards are set?
Yeah, so UCUM is an ISO standard, and there's somebody in Germany who is responsible for the harmonization with the other groups. So we are just the medical informatics groups, and there's another group who is responsible for standardization of units. So Christoph Gesner, he's the one who tries to build the bridge to the units organization from ISO. And besides that, fortunately, the huge vendors like Google, Amazon, and so on, Microsoft, they use the FIRE standard as well. And if you have this watch, out of this watch, there is a standard coming into your EHR with the Yukon standard. So they, were convinced that this should be the future and not their own standard for you units.
Okay, thank you. This is very interesting insight.
Perfect. So, Stefan.
Yeah, hello. Thanks a lot for the interesting talk. So, I mean, this is very much of this is about data sharing, and of course, standardization, harmonization is very important. But I was wondering if the legal aspects of data sharing are also part of these systems and standards, because I can imagine we always have this problem that these are personal data. And would it be necessary to have like another layer in these systems, like a user rights management, where people, like patients, can directly give their consent to different use cases, and then new data researchers, they can be classified into different categories so that you can automatically kind of like assign who will be able to use what? Is this already part of this whole ecosystem, or would it be needed or helpful?
Yes, sure. If you look at the FIRE library, you find one resource which is called a consent. That's the consent research resource. And beside that, FIRE is using the normal authentication, authentication standards like OAuth and OpenID for these problems here. And the other question from you was if is a person able to give their data to a doctor or to a scientist, and not all of the data, but some documents or some data. And the technical, it's technically, we can do it technically right now, not because the EHR, which we have right now in Germany, is not able to do it. So that's a discussion right now with our data schützer, who is responsible for this in Germany. But with the FIRE standards, which comes next year, you can just share data as you like. Yeah.
Okay. But do I understand it correctly that in the future, the patient checking in will basically have a sort of like sign a consent agreement, and all the data from then on will be basically under this consent?
Yeah,
that's
there's
very helpful.
Two different consent resources, which is for one is for the broad consent. So I say you can have everything, I don't care. And the other one is just like this, you can have this document. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, maybe following up on that on that question, which I found is very important. And you mentioned in your talk the combination of different registries in order to form some kind of an open data sharing perspective. Again, is this possible from an informed consent perspective? So it's one thing is fair, but the other thing is how much you can open that one. How if we bring these registries together, who is able to access that one? Is it so? What are the legal requirements for that one?
Yeah, you have different registries, and normally nobody is able to enter the data. That's a pity in Germany. And but you have some use cases, for instance, in oncology, the cancer registries at Robert Koch Institute. For if a scientist has a special question, he can enter the data. Yeah, but it's complicated, too complicated right now.
Okay, maybe coming back to your terminology forcing. You mentioned when we had our pre-chat that there is another law coming up from the Gesundheitsministerium, from Jens Spahn, on interoperability. Is this forcing companies to go for interoperability, or what is this made for?
Yeah, this new law is about a national coordination of health, or a national coordinator of health, or secretary. And this coordinator and the group with the coordinator is responsible to find out which standard should be used for which use case. And this is on top of all domains, like on public health and so on. And they have a lot of power, because if you're not doing this, or if you're a hospital or an outpatient care doctor, provide a standard, you don't get money. So you are forcing it implicitly, or with incentives. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. There was a little bit of dropout, but I think the message came across. So David Auerbach, another question.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now it's better.
Okay, sorry. My microphone was muted. So first of all, thanks for the talk. You mentioned that interoperability is especially important for rare diseases, where you obviously have limited amounts of data. And I guess at the end of the day, you want interoperability to do something with the data. But at the same time, I assume that especially for rare diseases, you have the problem that there are no suitable references or materials, so that the data itself is really not comparable. So what is then actually the benefit of interoperability if data itself is not comparable? And also, to put it differently, should data formats somehow take into account that standards are lacking, or that data should probably be flagged in some way that they might not be comparable?
I didn't get it really. What was your question then? Because the standard itself is not doing interoperability, but the standard and the implementation guides, or the implementation guide tells you how to use the standard and the processes behind the standard. Is this the answer? Or what?
No, not really. What I was referring to is that so if you have interoperable data and you could exchange data, people could use data from different resources all over the world, especially for rare diseases, as an example. But the data you're exchanging with others is not comparable itself due to missing reference materials and reference methods for the measurements itself that you did. So how that was my question.
I don't think so. As in lab, for lab results, it could be that you have different reference intervals and so on, but you have to tell it within the message that which system you use and which reference you use and so on. So it is comparable.
Yeah, I also think that because with the standards, you give much more information than at the moment. Then you can referring what kind of system you have used, which kind of version of a certain system you have used. Even if they are not comparable, at least you're knowing that. And I think that's quite good, because if you're pooling the data, at least you have all the information available. That at least was my understanding of the standard, giving more information beforehand. It was not that you're just giving a value. You don't even know, sometimes don't know what kind of unit system you have it. But now you're putting not even a unit, but also the system where you have acquired the data. So I think it's a quite good thing. Kevin, maybe in the same direction, I guess. Go ahead.
Yes, it's slightly different, actually. Certainly, I agree that it would be fantastic if we could get harmonization of the reference ranges in clinical laboratory medicine. And you could, I think the first step towards that really is having people share data. So that we have to get the first step first before we take the second step. One comment on the laboratory results and the nomenclature you were looking at that. Have you looked at the nomenclature that you're using for those particular reporting things? And I ask this because we've done quite a lot of work in the Joint Committee on Traceability in Laboratory Medicine to try and get across some of the nomenclature that we use in the vocabulary for metrology, so that everybody is very aware of, if you like, the dictionary of words that we use and what they mean. So have you engaged with anybody in that community to make sure the things you are requesting to be reported are actually VIM compliant?
Yeah, there is a whole community behind this LOINC terminology, and the European community is engaged as well. So, and always a definition if you have like glucose or something, creatinine, and there's a definition for this concept, which is based on PubMed or which is based on other scientific literature. Because you need a common understanding. I'm with you. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree that the nomenclature, I think, is also quite important so that we all know we're referring to the same things. And finally, certainly in our area, we're trying to push traceability to the SI further and further into biochemistry and biology. So my second question is about future-proofing this. As we start to get more biological molecules that we can make traceable to the SI, and therefore we may want to change the units, how will this system or how will these systems deal with this progression?
Yeah, these are agile systems, so you just ask the community or the university or NLM, and they can change these items, because medicine changes all the time. We have seen this at the pandemic, or within the pandemic, how they changed and the test results were changing and so on. They were very fast.
Yeah, certainly as new technologies came on, you start to see that as the technology gains ground or it gets more acceptance, things change slowly. But I think when we're talking about really having a global use of the data or a more wider use of the data, these types of things will have to happen in a more stepwise process. So we'll have to be like, okay, at this time, we all must change the reporting in this unit if we're going to continue to use the data in that global sense. So we're probably less likely to see this slow creep of data change or change of units, rather to a more stepwise approach. And I think that will be quite interesting to see how that happens.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, perfect. So I see still a hand from David Auerbach, but I'm not sure if this is a new one or an old one. Otherwise, I think I'd like to conclude, maybe even. Sylvia, thank you very much. I think what I've seen is amazing amount of standards which are out there, and especially this discussion we had just at the end here is that indeed we have to bring these communities together. That not standards are developed maybe in the metrology area are not feeding well into the medical domain. From my perspective, the SNOMED clinical terms is a big thing what has happened, and because it took so much long time to get these clinical terms right, and still we have different systems there. We had the system of the ICD, very similar, but then there was a clinical terms in SNOMED, and this is more or less a agreed standard now. Everybody is using that. And my hope would be also that in other areas like lab medicine, we get similar things where we harmonizing certain initiatives from the different communities. So this is fantastic work what you are really doing, and I think you are at BIH. You are at the central spot doing these things. So thank you very much. having you here, and I think there will be maybe a few more follow-up things coming, and I'm looking very much forward for some more joint collaborations. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you all.